Professor Wangui Goro.
Hello, and thank you very much, Alex, and for the conference for having me. I'm not yet a Mr., and I'm very excited to be following from Mark.
Apologies.
Because he said much of some of the things that I want to do. So Mark, please don't go away. I might need you at the end. But I'm sorry to apologize. And I must thank Dawn very much for inviting me here. I'm not a business person, but I'm a great consumer of tea. And I'm actually in Kenya right now, in case you want me to do some rummaging for you, Mark, while I'm here. But I'm also very excited because Dawn and I have been friends for over 40 years. She was the first Black person I saw at university when I turned up from Africa. And we've been friends and colleagues and professional colleagues as well. And we are supportive of each other, but also I'm interested in growing Black economies. I work in an international bank, the African Development Bank, but I'm not speaking here in that capacity. So please don't quote anything that I say. I'm British and I'm interested in the Black community and how we can advance. I'm a public intellectual as well as being an academic. And some of the things that I want to say very quickly are dull things which most Black people know, but I'm going to say them anyway, just so we're on the same page. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. And then we can move to the juicy things, such as Mark has been talking about, because as you can see, there is opportunity. He's an engineer, but now he's into tea. And I'm sure all the education we get, whatever kind of education we get, is useful. I am a language humanities student, but I'm working now in the bank, and I'm the editor of a very huge institution dealing with lots of zeros, and I'm there. So we must be multidisciplinary, and those are some of the recommendations that I'm going to make. We all know about our state, especially around race in our country, which is why perhaps we've been forced to create our own network, such as this Black economic network. And I think it's a good thing. And as Alex said, I think this is a very exciting time. COVID, no COVID, it is an exciting time because we're looking at ourselves fresh and addressing who we really are. Mark said he was broke, which is a good place from which to start because you couldn't go lower than that. And then you see the whole spectrum of what you must do to survive. So I think the example that's just come is very good. And of course he's Black, as you can all see, and he's successful and nothing's stopping him. So I think in Britain, we have a mindset of some heavy weight sitting on us, but I think partly it's a myth. We are richer than the indigenous people. We have Africa, we have the Caribbean, we have cousins in Europe and cousins in the United States, as you heard from the example, that the case study we've just heard. So we can tap into our families and friends to grow our businesses because they can help us to understand the local environments. Many people from other communities don't have that. They have their little village in Dorchester. I'm sorry, Dorchester, but somewhere anyway. I'm sorry to name that place. I don't know what it's like there, but I imagine it's far away and not as exciting as our transnational economic bloc that we have, that we don't recognize. Even if it just sold to Black people in Brazil and somewhere, and Barbados, that's enough market, and we understand these products and they're appealing because they're coming, as Mark said, from somewhere we already know. We're not you're not having to explain that this tea, it grows, you know what it is. So this for me is a very good start, starting with what we know. So we have this big debate about decolonizing education. And I think the killing or murder of George Floyd has created a global perception about the state of Black people. So this is a negative thing in terms of our humanity, but in terms of having people aware of us and our existence and the things that we do, I would say that the scope of awareness about us as people has grown across the world. You'll have seen those demonstrations, Black Lives Matter. There's a growth of why is the curriculum white, Me Too, Roads Must Fall. And most of these are people before it used to just be Black people marching. Now it's everybody else marching. In fact, sometimes we can just stay at home and watch it on TV and we're okay because people are advocating what we've been saying for centuries and for years. This is not matched by public policy. So the social end of things, people are okay. It's the policy level where we're stuck at the moment. But I think it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of time. And in the business world, these race issues don't matter so much as long as you're bringing back money to the exchequer. Is that true? I think that's true. That's if your dollar doesn't have, or pound or whatever, it doesn't have a color, bring it, it will be received happily. So I think we've got to think outside the box. I don't want to enumerate the race. We all know about diversity, equality of opportunity, non-discrimination. And these are just slogans and they've helped a little bit, but on the whole, we're human beings and we should be treated like anything else. So creating BAMEs or whatever those things are called, I think that is a negative approach to us as human beings. Our labor, our economic contribution is immense, including what we do outside the mainstream, like Saturday schools, the markets. This conference, for example, it's intense labor, but it's not recognized in the mainstream. So we should just see ourselves as part of humanity and forget all those BAMEs. We must fight for our rights, but we mustn't be put in those boxes because they are not true, they're not correct, and they hamper us from expressing our full humanity. I'm an academic and I couldn't get a job in the UK. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. And I was doing every other job. I'd have to learn this trade and I was getting exhausted. I'd done my degree, I'd done my PhD, I'd done my master's degree, and I had lots of experience, but I was never going to get a full-time job as a lecturer because according to statistics, Black women are at the lowest rung in the academic field. So I looked at the statistics, 400 and something, about 445 Black women are in the academic professionals. Black males, 1,495, white female, 4,565, and white male, 12,810. So there was no hope for me. I just looked at those numbers and I thought, it will take forever because there are many Black qualified people competing for these jobs. And if there are 12,810 males, white males competing for, what hope have I got statistically to get that job? So I found myself to Africa, where I got this swanky job that I really enjoy and I feel my humanity. And it's not because I'm in Africa, but it's because it's a different mindset. They care about my professional qualifications, not my color or my gender. So I'm doing my job as an editor. It's a skill. I know English, I know where to put a comma, that's what they're looking for, and I'm good at it, and they want to pay for that. So fast forward, we live in a UN context where racism, already there's a declaration, yet we are not living up to it. The data has consistently, I used to work in race and gender equality in the London Borough of Hackney, and we did research upon research upon research upon research, and our children are the lowest. They're failing consistently. not getting into jobs, and all the data, and the data is there for so many years. And the policymakers can see this data. So I have come to the view that it cannot be accidental. And I'm sorry to put it like that, and we can debate it. So what can we do? What can we do about this? Do we stay and complain and watch our people living in poverty? Because the data that I gave you translates to economics. So if there's that number of women academics, that means the rest of the people are below that and living in poorer conditions. They're probably teaching in secondary schools or doing other jobs, selling in shops and things like that. So we are pushed, our economies are pushed down by this data. No matter how much we study, and I've studied as much as any human being can study, it seems to be going, it's the ice, I call it the ice ceiling. For Black people, and for women, Black women, it's ice, a thick block glacier up there, and we'll just crash our heads if we keep trying to bang our heads. So we could find other ways, like, going around the glacier. It could be costly, or you could just be lucky that you can go and find the embassy in Barbados willing to hold a cocktail party for you. And those are some of the ways that I'm thinking that we must think outside the box and explore those alternative ways that allow us to circumnavigate this ice block that's hitting our heads so hard. So the data's there, and it's good to do research. Good product, marketing it well, and finding those niche markets, even new items. We eat Chinese food and and we enjoy it. So why can people not enjoy our rice and peas, or ackee and saltfish, or gari, or fufu, or whatever? We package it well and present it delicious and wholesome, and befitting the culture that we are taking it to through our market research. So just in summary, because I really want us to have a conversation about what we can do in places like the UK. Internally is to look at internal markets, which we've already heard about, and to look at global markets. I promise you, Mark, I had actually written these things down. Also look at the power of the internet. For me, in terms of education, we don't have to go to those brick buildings now. You can get courses for free on Coursera, on Future Learn. You can register to go to Harvard and do a business course. You do not have to go to those institutions that are going to limit you. The internet has freed us. Look beyond the little map and see what's on offer. Go to a university in South Africa, go to a university in Korea. If you get your loan, use it somewhere else where people will value your brain and let you learn in ways that are even different from what we're used to and without the barriers that we face. Also, to look at creating wealth internationally, collectively. I think that's what I heard Alex say, that it's about growing collectively and growing opportunities collectively. And that's what I've learned now. A lot of businesses in Africa are collaborating. And there's this big thing called the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is opening up. They signed an agreement to open the borders for trade. And I think for us in the UK, this is a huge opportunity of linking up with people locally, because you have the whole market. They want investment. If you want to put up your factory, or such as already we've heard from the case study, but this is the time. And if you get in now, this is the time for Africa. I'm not paid. I know about it from my job. I'm not getting any commission, but if you come a bit later, it may be too late, but this is the time to get into that space. And it's true, there are links now developing between the Caribbean and Africa. There are flights now, direct flights going between Africa. And so we're circumnavigating all those problems. We're also coming out of Europe, which means some of these countries have bilateral relationships with the UK, which we can take advantage of. And because of the education that we receive in the UK, and because of our kinship, we may have an advantage. We may have actually a kinship advantage in going, because we already understand our cultures and we understand ourselves. So I would advocate that we link up with the diaspora communities who are already in there, and our national communities and our countries and cultures of affiliation as well. Because this is, as well as going from our end in Britain, we can also approach this from the other end. So we have a two-way approach. Like, I'm a dual citizen, for example, so I can approach the two markets from my identity as a dual citizen. And we can do that because even if we don't have a passport, we have a spiritual and cultural passport to wherever our parents came from. I think we should also find alternative ways of fundraising. I don't know where you got your £1,000 from. I work in dollars, I apologize. I don't know where you got your pounds from, your £1,000, but it would be useful to talk a little bit about funding and how people can start with how much money you need to get your product viable. And one of the things that I've learned, which is really important, is forming associations, professional associations. It's good to have an event like this, I think, but imagine even this little group that has gathered this year, if we form an association, then it means we already have grown our network and we have different skills and knowledge and goods within this community, and to grow it exponentially and link it up with other networks. Because I belong to something called African Women in Europe, and they have a website, we have a radio of our own, and I've been watching you, Alex, etc. So, so we have our own media, and we have our own meetings, and it's very exciting with, and we do lots of things together. And there's a lot of opportunity even within the group, because each one of us has a huge network. So I think we also need to work on self-improvement, because the society is not geared to improve us. We mustn't, like when I got my degree, I felt like I'd arrived somewhere, but in the scale of the global scale, it's nothing. So you have to be the best. You have to be the best, the sharpest and the cleverest. And we have added advantage of being aware of other worlds. So we can sharpen that edge so that we are more refined, and then we stand out in the competitive marketplace. And then this sharing, such as this forum, is really important, and I'm really very proud of what you're doing here, Dawn, because it's an eye-opener, even for me, who is an aspiring businesswoman. I think after today, I'll get on and get to start my business, because I've learned all what I must do, have a product, what you said, and a business plan, and have a strategy. I've learned already. Then I think we also have a responsibility of mentoring and creating internships, and I'd like to hear from those who are present how they're working to build capacity, not just for their own businesses, but to grow this collective space, not just for our community, but I'm sure there's opportunities for, like, you know, the supermarkets, that they're benefiting from the products that we take there. And then I think the question of endorsement is really important. That it's because I see that in the other communities, there's endorsement and people tell you about each other. And then that's how, and they've got clubs and places where they gather and exchange knowledge and information. They talk about openings. So most of our embassies in the UK have got these business clubs. And it's also an additional benefit to belong to them, including being members of the mainstream business clubs. I think we shouldn't not be part of them. And to continue building our communities socially and culturally, because we then end up being role models, which is why I turn up to many events, because then people can see how far you can go. And and then they're encouraged that there's hope for them, that they're not just going to end up playing football or dancing hip hop, which is fine, but they must earn a living. Not everybody is going to be a music star or a football star. And I think we should continue pushing for apprenticeships and placements in mainstream and in our own organizations, and to also be engaged politically, because if the space is less violent and hostile to us as people, those who have the energy and courage should become politicians. And right now we have a good crop of politicians, and we must lobby them so that we have space, because we are citizens and taxpayers, and continue to educate people and remind them of our humanity. Thank you so much.
Great insight there, Professor. Great insight. Thank you so much for that. But there's a question that was pulling over in my head when you mentioned about policy. You said that the social was, we're dealing with the social, but policy level, we weren't quite there. How do we get things at policy level change? What do we do for that?
So, for example, we can't be absent from the space. I was just looking at the schools, the universities that have adopted this decolonizing curriculum, and I could talk a little bit about that. It's changing the epistemological stance of the British education system to say our view is not the only view, because it's a colonial view on the whole, and all that toppling of statues and things has shown that there are other views. So they said only 15% of the universities are willing to change their curriculum. So there's a whole gap of all these other universities that we need to address. Our children are choosing to go there. So if we do not push in the university system and at government level for this to be curriculum which is not optional, that it's good for the country, they trade with their former Commonwealth country. It doesn't even make sense to me, because when they go there, they find black people and brown people. So it doesn't even add up. When they go to those countries, people think we are British people, we are peculiar, because you have strange policies towards your people there. And then when you come to our countries, then you're behaving in a totally different way. So it's to match this, and it actually has advantages for Britain if they treated their black citizens well. They can be the ambassadors and for a long time, they have lip service commitment, but in practice, we know this is not true. And nobody can lie to black people, because they're the ones who live the brunt. Yesterday, I think in France, a black man, I think he's British, he went to France and he was beaten up very badly. You can look it up, and President Macron had to apologize. Yet they pose as the country of enlightenment. If we are enlightened in our country, and it's a big shame that these things happen in our countries. The biggest democracy, so-called, in the world is George Floyd was killed in broad daylight. And this is repeated. It's just we saw that one case, but it's repeated over and over again. So we're just asking to be human beings, and we don't even want anything, because if you're selling your tea and I'm teaching my students, then I'm not asking for anything more than what any other human being would want. So we must continue at the policy level. I have tried to think how, changing hearts and minds is a very big thing. I just do my thing, do it well, and then more of us will, and we must network and support our young people, because we can't just leave them to the prison system or to crime in the street. So we cannot take off on our own. We have to carry our children with us.
Wow, thank you so much for that. We cannot do this on our own. We have to bring our children with us. We have to bring the whole community with us. Amazing, great insight from you, Doctor. Great insight from you, Professor Goro. Thank you so much for that.
This work is by Kevin Tomlin, who is a music historian, artist, and art teacher.
Warning.